Welcome back to KMM Tech. Today we're going to take a look at my personal smart home hub, and that's Hubitat. I've recently made the switch over to Hubitat. I've been using it, I don't even know anymore. Probably maybe a year, a little less than a year at this point. So to give you an idea of what I started out with, years ago when I first started with smart home, I started with just the basics, which was just a Philips Hue bridge and a couple of colored lights. I added some Cree connected bulbs and some GE Link bulbs to that. And that was basically my smart home. I eventually upgraded, got a Naga Smart Lock, eventually upgraded and got a Nest Learning Thermostat. From there, I moved to a new home. I was in an apartment previously. And then I started to actually work on getting the house a little bit smarter. So I ran into some firmware issues with the Wink Hub, moved over to Smart Things, used Smart Things for about 1.5 to 2 years, and then eventually made the bigger switch over to Hubitat. I've done a video about smart hubs, so if you haven't seen that, I will link it in the bottom below. You can go and check that out, where I talk a little bit about the differences between these three different smart hubs. But just to give you a basic generalization, the Wink Hub and the Smart Things Hub require the internet. They are called cloud connected. The Hubitat Hub does not require the internet to work. So you can hook this up and then disconnect the internet from it as long as it's still connected to the network, which you have access to manually do things and change things. You don't need to have internet access to your hub at all. It is a local solution. It will still function without the internet. It will even function without the network connection. But if you do need to go in and make changes to the rules, and if you want to see the page that I'm looking at right now, what we're about to go through, it will. You do need to have it at least connected to your network. So without any further ado, let's jump into Hubitat. So what we'll do is when you first go to install your Hubitat, you go to portal.hubitat.com, you set up an account, and you log in. When you first log in, it goes, I believe it takes you to your dashboard screen. I bypass all of that, and I just have a favorite saved to the devices tab, which is what we're looking at right now. So what you see here is a list of all of my devices that I have connected to my Hubitat. There's quite a few, and some of them are light bulbs, some of them are switches, some of them are sensors, some of them are actually Logitech Harmony activities that I use to trigger other things, and so there's a whole bunch of different things here. This is where all of those devices are stored. And then once you have those devices, you can open up, let's say, the basement heater, for example. It takes you to this page, which is the page that's kind of dedicated to this device. So you'll see here, there's a configure button and off on button, so I can control the off and on state from here. I can refresh it to see whether the state is actually accurate or not. There are a bunch of preferences here. I don't generally go through and go through all of these. Every once in a while, there's a weird thing that happens. I have to go in and manually shut them off if I don't have a dashboard built. But this is where I go to do that. The other thing that's really handy under the device list is at the very bottom. You'll see that this right here, in use by. These are all of the rules that are associated with this specific device. So if this specific device is in a rule, it will be here. So you can see that it's part of the Amazon Echo app. It's part of the Google Home app. It's part of this goodbye rule, this goodnight rule, and this master pre-bed TV rule. So that's really neat when you're trying to troubleshoot things and things aren't working. That's really handy. The other thing that's really handy is this events tab up here. And if you click on the events tab, what it does, it takes you to the log. And the cool thing about the log is the log, if you don't touch anything, it will continue to run live. I'm sorry, this one is just the other log I'm talking about is different. Sorry, forget I said that. So this is just a list of the time that the heater was turned on and off, because that's all this can do is there's an on state and an off state. So you'll see that, like for example, here is the last time it was turned on. It was March 5th at 12:11 Eastern time, and before that it was turned off at 9:27 p.m. Eastern time. So it keeps a log of all of this, which is handy when things are doing things that you don't expect. Having this log, and there's another log that's even cooler that I'll show you in a little bit, that helps tremendously when trying to troubleshoot your rules and trying to figure things out. So the devices tab is where all of these devices are stored. So everything from my light bulbs, from my switches, to everything, okay, is all here. Now, in order to start controlling these things, I need to go through and build rules for them. And the rules are inside of the apps, okay? So I'll load up the apps page, and you'll see that there's a whole bunch of different options inside of here. Okay, so here's the Amazon Echo app. Basically what this is this is built into Hubitat. It has the ability to choose your devices that you want to be able to communicate with the Amazon Echo. Okay, Google Home is a little bit similar. It's just basically a login, and then all of your devices are then available to your Google Home. Okay. Groups and scenes. This is where I go to group lights together. So for example, in my bedroom, for example, I have 3 separate light bulbs. So what I've done is I've built in this master bedroom. It groups those 3 light bulbs into one group called master bedroom. The lights are named individually, and then the group is called master bedroom. I also have, there are scenes in here. So if you see, look over here, there's scenes, and then there's groups. So scenes are specifically, most specifically for the colored lights that I have, my Philips Hue lights. So for example, where is one of them? MBTV light. So this is a colored hue light strip that goes around my television, and this tells it what color to change that at a certain time. So I can just bring up this scene, and it will then spit that information out. Dashboards I'm going to show you separately. They're really kind of cool. One of the downsides that some people say about Hubitat is that there's no native application for Hubitat. It's all web-based, which means that you don't have that fancy dashboard type thing that you do have in SmartThings where you can control your devices. The cool thing is that you can build your own and you can customize it however you want. And I'll show you how I've built mine out. And these are all of my dashboards. I actually have several of them. I have a main, and then for each room that I have different dashboards as well. Simple lighting is one that I've just kind of been playing around with. You can do this with what I'm going to show you in a little bit, which is the rule manager. But we'll get to that. This is called simple lighting. It's basically a simpler version of the rule machine that's lower on. And I was just using this to test it out when I first got Hubitat. I'm eventually going to move these over into rule machine. Down here, this is the Philips Hue Bridge integration. Excuse me. This is what integrates the Philips Hue Bridge so that those Hue light bulbs can be communicated to by Hubitat. IFTTT integration. If you're using IFTTT, there are a few things that are not native to Hubitat that I use IFTTT for. For example, I have my Ring doorbell outside. There is no Ring doorbell app native to Hubitat. So what I've done is if my Ring doorbell senses motion, it then contacts Hubitat, and Hubitat will then flick the light on outside so that when there's motion sensed, that light still goes on. Life 360 connector, because there's no app for Hubitat at the moment. The only way to get presence, or one of the ways to get presence, I'm sure there are other ways, but I found the easiest way to do that was with this Life 360 connector. So Life 360 is an app for your smartphones. I believe it's Android and iPhone. And those, what it does is it basically tracks your movement, and it will then communicate that information back to Hubitat so that you can tell Hubitat when you're home and when you're away. And I'll show you some of those rules that I've created and how that works. Logitech Harmony. So I have 2 Logitech Harmony remotes, one in my bedroom and one in my living room. And this is what connects those 2 to the Hubitat. Very simple. Mode Manager. Mode Manager is something that is so cool. I love modes. Modes are so flexible, and they can really open up different options for you. When I was using Wink, modes were kind of there, but not really. Once I moved into SmartThings, the modes really started to open up different options for me. And I'll talk a little bit more about modes when we get to the modes section. Motion lighting apps. These are basically, again, this is kind of a thing that can be built into the rule machine as well. But as I was starting out with Hubitat, I used the motion lighting apps because it was a little bit easier to set them up and a little bit faster to set them up. So the motion lighting apps are there. Eventually they'll be moved into the rule machine. The Nest integration. This is something that's kind of sad, but Google is closing down their API soon, which means that if you have the Nest integration installed, you're set. However, if you ever get to a point where you accidentally uninstall it or have to reboot or reinitialize your hub and wipe everything out, restore it from scratch, you will no longer be able to get the Nest integration because Google is shutting this down. At that point, I will then probably replace my Nest with something else. But until then, I'm going to keep my Nest because I kind of like it. Although I'm not using the Nest for all of its fanciness at the moment because I'm having Hubitat control all of it. Then there's Rule Machine. So Rule Machine is all of the other rules that we have not talked about yet. So all of these are separate rules that control switches, lights, various other things. Sometimes it switches modes, and that's all controlled with Rule Machine. Okay. So that is the apps section. It's a little overwhelming at first, and we'll go through all of these, and I'm going to do kind of a day in the life of the smart home, which I had mentioned in my previous video about smart home hubs. And I'm going to show you how these rules work and what it's like to live with these rules day to day. Underneath that, there's settings. Not a place I spend a lot of my time. I'm mostly spending my time in the apps section and dashboards and devices, those top three. But there are things like location and modes is somewhere that I play around on a little bit. Checking for updates, backing up and restoring, and then here's how you can reboot your hub or shut it down. And these are Z-Wave and Zigbee controls here. I don't use those all that often, but I do want to show you location and modes, I think. So we'll hop on into location and modes. I'm going to hop right into the modes section here. Okay, so we're in the modes section. So up here it says the current mode. So modes are ways of turning things on and off. So I can say, for example, I've got this no bathroom motion over here. So at a certain point in the day, the mode switches to no bathroom motion. Okay, it's at night. It happens at actually it's triggered at this point by another rule, but somewhere between 8 and 9:30, a rule triggers and it turns my mode into no bathroom motion. So I've set it up so that my bathroom motion sensor does not work in my master bathroom during this mode. It's just because towards the end of the day I'm trying to wind down and I don't like to have bright lights. So there's enough light with my television and the dim light in my my bedroom to light the bathroom, so I don't have to worry about having the full lights in the bathroom kick on. So I have a home mode, so this is obviously for when I'm home. There's a night mode, so I have certain rules that can potentially fire depending on certain circumstances, and I've used the night mode to exclude those rules from firing. The away mode is very similar, so if I'm away from the house, it will shut off those rules from firing. Like things like my kitchen lights are set to go on in between 4:45 and 6 o'clock every day. But if I'm not home, that rule will not fire, so I'm not wasting electric and those lights don't go on. So I have a weird rule called arrival. This is what happens when I first arrive home from being away. And it's kind of an awkward way that I had to get some things to work. Not one that you'll probably have to worry about setting up, but it's there. Morning is another mode. This is kind of similar to the night mode and the no bathroom motion mode. I have this set up so in the morning, which is between 5 and 8 o'clock a.m., my bathroom motion sensors don't work. Again, there's enough light in the house where I don't have to worry about that. So That's how those modes work. Now, these modes are really kind of cool because they can be triggered by a rule or they can be triggered by a certain time of day. So I'm going to go back into apps for a second. And then we're going to hop on into the mode manager. Mode manager, you'll see that it says home. And that's because I'm home and it's during the day. So here you'll see that the home mode starts at 8 a.m. Okay, the morning mode starts at 5 a.m. Night mode starts at 11:30 p.m. And if I am away, these three modes will not change. So if I am away from the house and it happens to change to 8 o'clock in the morning, it will not switch to the home mode. The only thing that I have to make sure is that my away will eventually somehow switch it back to home mode, which it does. And the away is triggered by the presence of my cell phone using Life 360. You can set modes with buttons. You can also set modes with switches. You can also go into the rule manager, the rule machine, and set rules, set modes based on rules. So for example, I'll show you master pre-bed TV. So this rule you'll see, so here's what happens. So when the master bedroom sensor is active, okay, it's going to turn on the Apple TV. It's going to turn off all of these switches and bulbs and all that sort of stuff. It's going to activate that scene. That's that scene I mentioned earlier, the light that surrounds my television, and this tells it what color and what brightness it uses. And then if you look right here, mode, it sets the mode to no bathroom motion. Okay, so you can use a rule to change the mode as well, which is kind of neat, which just shows you how powerful this can be. So the next thing I want to show you is I want to show you logs. So logs are just so helpful when you're going to create rules and they're not working the way you think they should work. The really neat thing about logs is that you can see past logs or you can see live logs. So if you're looking at the screen now, you'll see that it says live log started waiting for events. So it's waiting for something to happen. So if I trigger, for example, my heater to go off, I'll trigger that. Here's something. This happens to be something with the Nest Learning thermostat. It kind of probes it to make sure that it's still connected. But let me show you what happens. I'm going to turn off my my heater in the basement. Alexa, turn off the heater. So you'll see that the basement heater was turned off. I don't know if you can hear it actually click off. So you'll see how that happens really quickly. And that's the nature of a local solution. The cloud-based solutions don't happen nearly that quickly. So now I'll turn the heater back on. Alexa, turn on the heater. And it comes right back on. And the lag is actually more for the Amazon Alexa, which is connecting between the cloud and the Hubitat. So there is that lag, but it actually happens a lot faster than that. The way the rules of the logs work, if you look up here at the top, you'll see that there's Nest Event Stream, and then there's Basement Heater. So now the Basement Heater is one of my devices. So if I want to see just the Basement Heater stuff, I can click on this and see just the Basement Heater. This is just the stuff that's live, okay? I can go back and see everything that's happened by going here and going Show Past Logs. When I click on Show Past Logs, the page is going to refresh, and it's going to start bringing up all of the logs for everything that's happened. I think it keeps logs back just a couple days, I think. So here are all of the logs that it has, and if you look down here, I mean, it goes quite a ways. I do have a lot of stuff happening, and a lot of this stuff you'll notice is this Nest Event Stream, which again is how Hubitat make sure it has a communication back to the Nest Learning thermostat, which makes the The log's a little bit cumbersome to use because a lot of it's that. But you'll notice that there's a lot more options up here. Okay, so if I want to see, for example, when the garage door was open, so I can hit the garage door. Okay, you'll see that it was closed at 2 o'clock. It was closed at 1:40. Master bedroom sensor. This will show you all the times that I've been inside of my master bedroom, and there was activity in that room. So all of those times for today are there. So this is really, really helpful for when you're trying to troubleshoot this sort of stuff. Knowing why things happen isn't always as obvious as you think. Sometimes rules trigger and they actually trigger something else sometimes, depending on how you have things set up. So being able to go in and check these logs to see what's happening and why it's happening is really, really neat and really, really helpful. So let's go through, let's create a rule inside of the rule machine, just so you can kind of see how robust this really is. So we'll load up the apps here, and let's go to rule machine. Okay, so here you have lots of options. There's create new rule, create custom commands, create or delete global variables, which is in beta. This is the user guide for rule machine. And if you want to remove rule machine from your Hubitat, this is how you do that. If you do that, just keep in mind that all of your rules go with it. So just wave goodbye, make sure you have a backup before you do that. So we're going to go through, we're going to create a new rule. Okay, so this is where things start to get really confusing and overwhelming for some people. Okay, so there are two basic kind of rules. There are more, I understand, but for the most part, there is a triggered rule and there is a rule based on certain conditions. Here's how I look at it. If you have a rule that is going to be triggered by one thing for the most part, like time or motion or something like that, a door opening, that is a triggered event. Okay, so it's one thing that is triggering something else. Okay, that would be when you'd use trigger. If you're using multiple things to create your rule, for example, let's say if you wanted to have it set so that at 4 o'clock your light goes on, but only if you're home, for example. Not a great example, but that's when you would use define a rule, because you have multiple conditions that have to be met in order for that rule to function. In the triggered event, it's just one thing that's triggering that thing to happen, like the push of a button, the opening of a door, motion in a certain area. That sort of thing is a trigger. But if you have multiple things to trigger a rule, or multiple conditions to be met before a rule will trigger, then you need to have a define rule. Okay, so we're going to define a trigger. So we'll hit define a trigger. First thing we'll do is name the trigger. This is just a name for the rule. And then we'll hit continue. If you wanted to change the name, you can go here and you can change it if you didn't like the name that you gave it, but we're going to leave it as test. So the next thing you have is select trigger events. So this is what is going to happen in order to cause this to happen. So if you go to select trigger events, click to set. You can set it if a battery gets too low. You can set it if a carbon monoxide detector gets off. You can set it for a certain time. Door opening or closing. There's so many different things that can trigger this to happen. Okay. So for this case, we're going to set it so it's going to be a certain time. And you can even have two triggers. In this case, we're going to have only one. So at a certain time, we're going to click to set. And we're going to set this for 2:28 p.m. and then we'll hit done. Okay. So this is saying, okay, at 2:28 p.m., this is going to happen. What's going to happen? Well, we're going to tell it what's going to happen. And that's where we go to select actions. So we go to actions. Inside of here, there are so many options. You can delay the action to happen. You can control switches. You can control dimmers and scenes. This is where you control colors of your Philips Hue light bulbs. You can control garage doors and thermostats. You can even send a message to your cell phone if you wanted to. This is for external commands for external services. You can send HTTP requests. This is where you can set your mode. You can have rules stop and run other rules from here. We're going to keep this very, very simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to control a switch. So we go to control switches. And we can either turn switches on, turn switches off, toggle them, which means if they're on, it will set them to off. But if they're off, they'll switch them to on. You can flash switches. So if you wanted to flash your lights for a certain thing, you could do that. You can turn them off after a delay. So you can turn them on and then have them go off after a certain amount of time. You can even set the switches per mode, which means if you're in your home mode, you can set it that the light will go on at 100%. But if you're at the nighttime mode, it'll only go to 50% if you want. So many options. It's so overwhelming, the amount of things that you can create. So in this case, we're going to set it to turn off these switches. So we hit click to set. And what it will do is it will preload all of my devices that I have in that device list view that I showed you before. So in this case, we're going to turn off my basement heater because it's right next to me. So we'll hit basement heater and we'll hit update. Okay. And at this point, we're going to ignore all of this sort of stuff because it's just a little bit too much for what we're trying to do here. And then we'll hit done. Okay. We can add more things here. In this case, we're not going to. So we'll hit done again. So this is kind of a summary of what we've created. So here we have a name of a rule. It's called test. It's going to fire at 2:28 p.m. Off is what's going to happen. It's going to take the basement heater and turn it off. Okay. I can set restrictions so that it'll only happen between 2 times. Again, we're going to keep it simple for right now, but know that those options are there. So we're going to go to done. And when you hit done, it saves the rule. And then we're going to hopefully hop on into the logs quickly before 2:28 p.m. So you can see that it is 2:27 p.m. And in just a few seconds, we should have the basement heater go off. Let me see if I can see what time. Yep, we're about 10 seconds away. So in about 10 seconds, the basement heater should go off and the log should appear. There's that heartbeat. There we go. Basement heater was turned off at 2:28 p.m. Okay? All because of that rule that we just set up. So there is creating a rule in Hubitat. Very simple, but very, very powerful. Alexa, turn on the heater. And there is the heater turned back on. So that is some real basic stuff about Hubitat. I'm going to do some more videos about more advanced rules. There are certain rules that I have in my house that I have set up using Boolean values that are just so helpful. But I want to show you guys the day in the life of a smart home, so you guys can see what it's like to live with a smart home. Then I'll show you how to create some of the more advanced rules. This is a simple on-off rule that I showed you how to do, but it's still very powerful, still very, very helpful. So we're going to call it quits for today, guys. That is enough, I think. If you have any questions, please make sure you leave a comment below. I'll be happy to answer your questions. If you like this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up. And if you do like what we're doing here at KMM Tech, please make sure you subscribe. Hit that bell notification so you're notified when our new videos come out. We're trying to release a new video every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. So be sure you check back then. But make sure you hit that bell notification so that way you are notified by email when those new videos come out. That's it for today, guys. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.